Greetings, all. This is Rick Levine with your January astrological forecast as we face a new year. 2026 is right up on us, and boy, 2026 will prove to be quite a year ahead, perhaps unlike any that we have seen prior, and we've seen some pretty intense ones in the recent past. Before we get into the actual forecast, have some orders of business to take care of. The first is our drawing for our free chart reading. Each month we pick one person from my email list. If you're not on the email list, you can go to ricklevineastrologer.com, sign up for the email list, and each month we pick one person at random. This month we've picked Janice Nunn, and she's number 122 on the email list. And so she's been with us a long time. Thank you, Janice, for your participation here. And you will receive an email from my assistant, Gail, and we will get you scheduled for a mini reading that includes your harmonic aspects. And this is done on the first of every month, or actually for the first of every month. And again, thank you. And if you're not on the email list, please feel free to sign up. Won't overwhelm you with marketing stuff, but you'll be at least appraised of some of the upcoming events that I have, and also be notified when I post something on YouTube or when there's something that is astrologically significant. I want to mention a couple of things that are coming up. First of all, I want to mention that the astrology night, which is normally the first Friday night of each month, there will be none in January. I am still in England. I'm recording this from a couple of hours north of London in Lincolnshire. And the next astrology night will be at Soul Food Coffee House in Redmond, Washington, and that will be on Friday evening, February 6th. That's the first Friday night in February, and I look forward to seeing some of you there. That begins at 6:30 in the evening. It is live streamed, and for those of you in the neighborhood, we will see you there. I do have a couple of quick announcements today. I want to make sure that everyone knows that starting January 18th, I will be teaching for my fourth time a course on Introduction to Harmonic Aspects. And for those of you who are on my mailing list, you've already received notification of this. But, you know, as many of you know, harmonic aspects are kind of my thing. And it really breaks us out of this patriarchal, three-dimensional astrology where we're only looking at events in the real world as opposed to metaphysical events and more soul-oriented issues. I've been working with these aspects for decades now. I'm certainly not the only person who works with them. These all come out of a long tradition, but is largely excluded by practitioners of either Vedic astrology and or some of the older Hellenistic and or medieval and or even Renaissance astrology. And if you're interested in any of this, this course actually builds on the foundations of aspects in astrology and then presents these newer aspects, many of which were introduced by Johannes Kepler, aspects that include the semi and sesqui-squares and the quintiles and the septiles and the noviles and more. It's a 5-week course. It begins on Sunday, January 18th. It's being taught through Kepler College. Advanced pricing ends on January 4th. And these will be at noon on Sundays, 5 consecutive Sundays, beginning the 18th. And I look forward to having you, many of you, in that class. It's a really exciting class, and it will change how you look at charts and what you get out of charts when you are actually looking at them. So that's my introduction to harmonic aspects at Kepler College, and the link to this and all of the links will be in the first pinned comment below. And if you go to the first comment and click on more, there'll be all the clickable links to these events, including the Kepler College Introduction to Harmonic Aspects. Then, on the week of February 27th, from Friday evening, February 27th, through Thursday, March 5th, I'll be doing a 6-day journey into astrology, but using your own chart. So this is actually, for many, it will be a totally introductory course. But if you're already reading your daily horoscopes or watching YouTube videos or even reading books, this will allow you to take your astrology to the next level. The unique thing about this course, it'll be a relatively small group. It is limited. And it's going to be in person only, so this will not be an online event. It'll be, the venue is a beautiful venue. It's in Buellton, California at Redtail Studio, and this is just north of Santa Barbara. Information on the venue and the event is at Heaven and Earth Workshops. The link to the exact page also will be in the comments. But the unique thing about this 6-day venture, journey, course, retreat, whatever you want to call it, is that each person will have a copy of their own chart with supporting material, and the entire week will be working on our own charts in order to better understand how we can use astrology in our daily lives. And it really doesn't matter what your skill level is. This course will increase your fluency in astrology and give you some tools so that when you look at a natal chart, you'll know where to go. We'll look at the core building blocks of chart interpretation, including planet signs, houses, and aspects. And this program is being put together by Heaven and Earth Workshops. Heaven and Earth Workshops produces my retreats in Bali, Mexico, and India. And this will be the second one that'll be in the beautiful Santa Ynez Valley in Southern California. This is my 15th astrology retreat with Heaven and Earth Workshops. There'll be food provided every day. There's a daily curriculum for those of you interested. Go to heavenandearthworkshops.com and then click on the events, and there'll be a complete daily schedule of all the things that we'll be covering through this, and I look forward to seeing some of you there. Then on March 20th through the 30th, I'll be participating in a program called Mystery School at Sea. MysterySchoolAtSea.com is the website. And this is not just an astrology journey. This really is meant to widen our perspectives, to stretch our minds. This is going to be a real journey of discovery. There will be people there from very different orientations that will be presenting workshops and lectures as we that come from a variety of mystery school teachings. And we're going to be sailing from Athens, which of course is the birthplace of modern Western or Western astrology and sacred geometry. We'll be visiting sacred sites on the islands of Crete and the Minoan traditions that were the home to Gnosis there and the labyrinth. We'll be visiting the island of Helios and the Colossus. We'll be stopping off at Thessaloniki and Ephesus, Turkey, which is where the Christian mystics united with the great Mother Artemis. And then we'll be stopping at Kavala, where Paul, which is really first preached in Europe. So this is going to be an exciting 10 days. I'll be doing 3 talks on the program. Complete information is available on this at Mystery School. At mysteryschoolatSea.com, and it'll be on a luxury cruiser, and it will be an extraordinary cruise. and I look forward to some of you there. I'll also be doing some special programs for those of you who sign up through this, and with my name as reference. I'll be hosting a couple of events during the week for those who are particularly interested in astrology, aside from some of the other tools that we'll be looking at that week, including revisioning some ancient history, our place in the cosmos. So there'll be certainly some material covered on extraterrestrials and other things of that sort. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. It's going to be quite a week and a half. Then I'll be back in London from May 15th to the 18th for Shifts Happen 2. And there'll be more information on this down the road, but this will be the second round of Shifts Happen. And I'll be there again with Steve Judd and Alex Trenowith. This year we'll have the amazing astrologer Darby Costello. It'll be a real treat to have her input on this group. That's London, May 15th through the 18th. And then the following weekend, I'll be back across the sea and back in my home area of Seattle, Washington for NORWAC, the Northwest Astrology Conference. That's May 21st through the 25th. This is actually my 35th NORWAC that I'll be attending, and I'll be doing the opening keynote there, a lecture on the program, and then I'll be doing a post-conference workshop that you can attend whether or not you join us for the whole weekend. And then, of course, I'll see many of you at UAC, the United Astrology Conference, September 3rd through 9th in Chicago. I'll be doing a lecture on that program, and then also a post-conference workshop there also. So all of the links will be below, and I look forward to meeting some of you who I've never met before and seeing some old friends and people I've known for many, many years at a variety of these events. And if you've never been to an astrology conference or gathering, they are extraordinary for pushing your astrological awareness further. So that's it for that. And with no further ado, let's look at the opening month for 2026. Now, as we move into 2026, although this is really focusing on January of 2026, um, there's a number of things that I've done already online, both with Astrology Hub and with Kepler College, that are talks on 2026 as more of an overview. But in order to talk about January of 2026, we really have to talk about what we're entering into for the entire year, because we leave 2025 and it's like we're getting onto a rocket ship. We've been in a couple of year period where we're moving out of something, but we don't know what we're moving into. By the end of 2026, we will know what we have moved into. I think on some levels, our longer term fate will be relatively sealed. There won't be any going back. And so I think that the opening month or months of 2026 are hugely significant to what unfolds throughout the year. Of course, one of the first events that we have in 2026 is the once every 35, 36 year conjunction of Saturn and Neptune that occurs at the end of February. But what's significant for us as we look ahead right now to 2026 and to January, what's significant is that Neptune actually moves into Aries on the 26th of January. Now, I get that that's already toward the end of January, but you see, both Saturn and Neptune were in Aries. Saturn had moved into Aries last May, and Neptune had moved into Aries last March. And so by May, both Saturn and Neptune were already in Aries, but then they turned retrograde. Saturn turned retrograde in July. Actually, they both turned retrograde in July. But then Saturn retrograded back into Pisces the beginning of September, followed by Neptune because it moves slower. Neptune retrograded back into Pisces by the end of October. Now both of them are moving direct again, and they will both move out of Pisces and into Aries. Uh, Neptune does that, as I mentioned earlier, on January 26th. Saturn, moving faster, moves into Aries on February 13th, and then within a week, while they're both Saturn and Neptune are at 0 degrees of Aries, Saturn will catch up to Neptune and they will conjoin. And this is going to be a very profound and powerful time. We'll speak more of this in the February forecast, but understand that we've been working with this conjunction really all through the summer and autumn of 2025 because Saturn came within a quarter of a degree of being exactly caught up and conjoining with Neptune before they both went retrograde. And what's important to understand is that here at the beginning of January, Saturn is about 3.25 degrees away from being exactly conjunct. So it's a little bit over 3 degrees of orb from being exactly conjunct with Neptune. But by the 1st of February, Saturn has closed into Neptune, so it's only less than 1.5 degrees. And then, of course, by February 20th, that conjunction becomes 0 degree orbed, meaning that it is exact and perfected. So what we're coming into and what we're experiencing at relatively high speed now through the month of January is we're coming into a time where Saturn, the planet of crystallization, the planet of the three-dimensional reality that we perceive through our five senses, Saturn will be solidifying and crystallizing some of Neptune's dreams, some of Neptune's illusions, some of our fantasies, because Neptune kind of is the planet that dissolves Saturn's hard edges and encourages us to use our imagination. And when Saturn and Neptune come together, there is often a sense of what is real, what is imagination, what is fact, what is fiction, what is nonfiction, what is reality. All these things come into question, and I think that we are coming into this period at high speed. We've had a taste of it now for months. But as Saturn and Neptune are both moving direct, and especially then as Neptune moves from Pisces back into Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, as it does that on January 26th, it's almost like our imagination becomes progenerative. It becomes creative in as much as Aries energy is the procreative energy of the zodiac. And so there's the sense that we're not just dreaming. As Neptune moves into Aries, followed by Saturn, we're converting what was dreams into reality. And what we work on, how we use that discipline and hard work and effort of Saturn, how we use that will determine actually what is it that actually manifests and what stays in the realm of dreams or dissipates back out into nothingness, into dreaminess. So I think that that's really significant. The other thing that is significant in January is that we get the third and final sextile between Saturn and Uranus. Now, remember, we have this ongoing dance of the trine between Uranus and Pluto that everyone who's been following astrology for more than a year is probably tired of hearing about already. But trust me, you won't be tired of hearing about this as we begin to see how this actually unfolds through 2026 through the summer of 2026 into 27, 28, and even beyond. This is a very slow moving transit that combines the revolutionary and it combines the revolutionary force of Uranus with the evolutionary force of Pluto. It combines the shock and surprise and lightning like changes that Uranus precipitates, along with Pluto's deeper unconscious manifestations of the dark, of the shadow work. And remember, the last time that Uranus and Pluto were trine were back in the crazy, hectic heyday of the 1920s. And I'll be talking more about some of the similarities of previous Uranus Pluto trines over the months ahead. But what's important in January is that although this energy has been backing off a little bit, Uranus, which has been retrograde, widening the trine between Uranus and Pluto, Uranus turns direct in February, and then it will move pretty quickly toward making that exact trine. Along with this, Neptune moving through the midpoint of this Uranus Pluto trine, Neptune will be sextiling both Uranus and Pluto, again becoming exact later this year in July of 2026. But Saturn, as it's moving direct, moves quickly through these points. And here's what happens in January. In January, Saturn makes a sextile with Uranus. And this is the third and final sextile that Saturn makes with Uranus during this time. The first Saturn Uranus sextile was back last April, the beginning of April, April 4th. The second one was in August, around August 11th, and then the third and final one is on January 19th. Saturn is the planet of reality, of crystallization. Now remember, Saturn's moving toward Neptune. That will be exact on February 20th. But in the interim, Saturn makes the third and final exact sextile with Uranus. And when it does that on January 19th, we can expect some of the shock, surprise, awe, revolution, breakthrough, the genius of Uranus manifesting in the three-dimensional world. And I think that herein lies what January is really all about. We're going to take this day by day as we move through the month. But I think it's important to understand that as Saturn moving direct makes that third and final sextile with Uranus, and as Saturn is also moving toward its conjunction with Neptune, that even though that's not exact until February, we're going to be feeling things moving forward again. And when I say again, we've had outer planets going retrograde through a lot of late last summer and into the fall. And then one by one, they began turning direct. We really right now have Jupiter that's still retrograde, Uranus that's retrograde until the beginning of February. But we're going to be moving forward almost like we're being accelerated, like a rocket taking off. And I think that's what we need to look at as we look into January of 2026. So let's take a look at a chart. And we here have the chart for noon of January 1st. And remember, even though I am broadcasting this from the UK, that all the charts we are looking at are for Pacific time, Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 time zones prior to GMT, Greenwich time, or Universal time. And so all charts here are Aries rising, which means that there's no horizon, because although once you adjust your time zone to this chart, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. At noon Pacific time, wherever you are on the planet adjusted your time zone, the moon will be at 19 degrees of Gemini. In other words, this chart does not have any horizons in it because you guys are located all over the world. All right, so as we look at this chart, we can certainly see that Mercury at 29 degrees and 56 minutes of Sagittarius is squaring Neptune. That square between Mercury and Neptune actually occurs early in the morning today. The square was exact this morning at 5:33 a.m. And of course, this is specific Pacific time. And this actually is interesting because as Mercury squares Neptune, it's like illusions rock out, illusions predominate. It's hard to know what's real. And as we go into the closing days of 2025 and into the beginning of 2026, we may really be dazed and confused by what is it that is real as Mercury, the planet of thinking, is squaring Neptune, the planet of imagination and fantasy. However, Mercury slips into Capricorn at 1:10 p.m. That's just afternoon Pacific time on the 1st of January. And now we're talking about 2026 really beginning to unfold. Regardless of what you do on New Year's Eve, it's almost like the real New Year starts midday on January 1st, because at that point in time, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars will all be in Capricorn, and they are moving toward a very unique event that as the month unfolds, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars will all kind of come into a very close coalescence that becomes pretty tight right around the 18th, around the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, right in there. In fact, at the new moon in Capricorn, it will already be dissipating. And all this Capricorn energy is really, it's like a sobering up. You know, there was this old commercial that I remember from my childhood that was for an aftershave that was bracing, and it was the commercial was like someone put the shaving the aftershave lotion on, and it was like a slap to the face, and the person went, "I needed that." I'm not promoting any sort of slapping to the face or any sort of violence physically, but I think that this is going to be like a real sobering up. We're going to have to deal with some realities that we've been putting off, that we've not faced in a way that, even though they've been out there, I mean, look, we already have Mars and Venus and the Sun in realistic Capricorn. Capricorn is about it's about hierarchy. It's about knowing where the ground is and where the summit is so that we can actually climb that mountain. And as Mercury moves into Capricorn on the first, I think we're going to really feel this quite strongly, especially as we're snapping out of that Mercury squaring Neptune that was active in the closing days of 2025 and really for the first hours of 2026. We also note that we have the moon in Gemini, and and the moon actually will stay in Gemini until the second. Let's move this chart ahead to the second. And we can see that by noon on January 2nd, the moon has moved into Cancer, into its home sign. It does that on at 5:08 a.m. And you can see that with the sun in Capricorn and the moon having just moved into Cancer, we're coming into a full moon that's not exact until tomorrow. We'll go to that chart in just a moment. But we can see something else here that I think is quite important during the first part of the month, which I think is quite stressful and tense. And that is we have the makings of a T square that involves planets in Capricorn. Here we now have Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars. Opposite planets in Cancer, and now we have the moon at the full moon, and Jupiter, and those planets are squaring to the planets that are in Aries. And at the beginning of the month, those are Capricorn, those are Chiron and Eris. And by the end of the month, Neptune will be there. And then, of course, Saturn will move on into Aries in February. So we can see here at the beginning of the month, the beginnings of this T square unfolding here on the second. We can also see that Chiron, which has been retrograde, turns direct. It's stationary direct today on the second. In fact, Eris turns stationary, is stationary direct on the 11th. And that conjunction, which has already occurred, will get closer and closer through this, the early part of 2026 again. And in fact, that Chiron Eris conjunction will happen for the third and final time mid-March, March 19th, actually. But Chiron and Eris have already joined up exactly back toward the end of May of 2025. And then at the beginning of October, and that was also 2025. And in a way, this background energy of very slow moving Chiron and even slower moving Eris is kind of like a really deep, deep, deep disturbance that would be Eris kind of throwing a monkey wrench into the gears to see what's going to break and what falls apart. And Chiron relating this to old wounds that maybe have been with us for millennia, even. And this Eris Chiron conjunction is still in play. And we have Jupiter having retrograded through the square to Eris and Chiron, and that Jupiter square has been exact, but it already been exact over the last month or two. But then Jupiter will turn direct, and we will get a third and final square from Jupiter to Chiron and Eris. But it's that Jupiter squaring Chiron and Eris that at the beginning of the month is really just, I mean, it's a degree and a half from being exact to Chiron, and about 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees to Eris. And it's that square that will be exacerbated as the faster moving planets of the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars all move through the opposition to Jupiter while they're squaring Chiron and Eris. And we'll watch this unfold during the month. And I think that this becomes a very important part, at least of the first part of January. So that's January 2nd. Let's move to January 3rd. And on the 3rd, we actually have the full moon. Now, the full moon occurs on January 3rd. Um, the full moon occurs at 2:02 a.m. That's just after midnight on the 3rd. And this occurs at 13 degrees of Cancer and 13 degrees of Capricorn. In other words, the moon is at 13 degrees and 2 minutes of Cancer opposite the sun at 13 degrees and 2 minutes of Capricorn. I think the most significant thing about this full moon is that the full moon is approaching a conjunction with Jupiter. It's still a ways away. It's a half a day away from being exact, but it's kind of moving into that square between Chiron and Eris that I talked about earlier. The other thing of significance about this full moon is that the sun is being joined up by Venus. Now, the sun is moving slightly faster than Mars now. It'll take a while for the sun and Venus to catch up to Mars. But during this full moon, the sun and Venus are only minutes of degrees apart. In fact, the Venus will conjoin the sun on the 6th because the two planets are moving at such a similar speed right now. It'll take a little bit for the two to actually join up. But this is a very close conjunction. Now, In some schools of astrology, in Hellenistic astrology, for example, when a planet is close to the sun, like Venus and Mars are here during the full moon, they are considered to be combust or kind of absorbed by the sun's rays. Quite frankly, I'm not sure how true that actually is in practice. I understand the concept, but my experience is that often when Venus, Mars, or Mercury are close to the sun, rather than being swallowed up by the sun, that energy does actually amplify the nature of that planet. That's for you to decide. I'm not trying to talk anyone out of anything that they've learned or that works for them. But the fact of the matter is that at this full moon, the moon is opposing Venus and the sun and coming into an opposition just a few hours after the full moon to Mars. And so there certainly is some tension here between our deepest insecurities, the how we want to protect our own feelings, that would be the moon in Cancer, and the what we're going to do in the outer world to actually overcome those feelings and maybe make things happen in the outer world. I think that this full moon is an opportunity to be aware of our sensitivities before taking action in the outer world, in the three-dimensional world. As we move to January 4th, we can see that the moon is now at noon in Leo. The moon actually enters Leo at 5:43 a.m. on Sunday, January 4th. And as it does, it will move into that opposition to Pluto. And this also is still rather intense. I think also another thing that we need to watch is as the inner planets later through the month move from Capricorn into Aquarius, one by one, each of them will conjoin Pluto. And this is going to be, I think, some really powerful unveiling, exposing of things that were secret prior to this. In fact, and I think we're going to get a taste of this as the moon moves into Leo this morning on Sunday, January 4th. And by mid morning, the moon will make its exact opposition to Pluto. And I think that will give us some foreshadowing of what there is to come around the bend. But let me just point out here that on January 19th, Venus will conjoin Pluto after moving into Aquarius. Venus moves into Aquarius on the 17th. The sun moves into Aquarius on the 19th, and the sun will join up with Pluto on the 22nd. On the 23rd, Mercury will join up with Pluto on the 22nd. Each of these planets, one at a time, as they move into Aquarius, will join up with Pluto. In fact, Mars reaches its conjunction with Pluto as it moves, after it moves into Aquarius on January 23rd. Mars lines up with Pluto, and that occurs on the 27th. All of these are about intensity, volatility. And this is why I say as we move through the month, I think things are going to really pick up and a lot of things are going to come out in the open. Even if we think that a lot of things have already come out in the open, I think we're on the tipping point of huge reveals that are going to change that are going to change everything. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. This is January 4th. On the 5th, there's no exact aspects from any of the outer planets, but look how close Venus now is to the sun. The two of them are moving at such a similar speed. It's still going to take a couple of days for Venus to close it's at 1/5 of a degree. It's 12 minutes of arc at noon uh, on the 5th, and at 12 minutes of arc, this Venus is already in the sun's rays. It's already Cazimi. That Venus is absolutely profoundly powerful right now. But look at how close that Venus and sun are to Mars, they're already coming into the sun. Is less than 1 degree to Mars. Venus is just over 1 degree to Mars. This is an incredible conjunction and very rare for the sun to be enclosed by Venus and Mars, the cosmic lovers. That's such a tight, tight, tight conjunction. This is on the 5th. We move to the 6th, and by noon on the 6th, the moon moves into Virgo. But as it does, it's going to begin a couple of days of it trining all of those planets in Capricorn, including Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and Mars, over the next couple of days. This is on January 6th. And today, here on the 6th, the Venus you can see is now ahead of the sun because that exact conjunction, the Venus-Sun conjunction, occurs at 8:36 a.m. this morning on January 6th. And look again now how close the Venus and Mars are, and the sun is still moving into that also. Venus to Mars is about a half a degree. And the sun to Mars is just a little over a half a degree. This is a crazy exact conjunction as the sun, Venus, and Mars are all moving into that opposition with Jupiter. Here, they're only 3, 4 degrees away from that opposition. This is an incredibly potent period of time where too much of anything can happen. And let's move this ahead now to the 7th. Now we have Venus caught up with Mars, the exact Venus-Mars conjunction. Here you can see that at noon it's just barely 8 minutes of arc. That's less than a sixth of a degree from being exact. The exact conjunction occurs at just before 7 o'clock here on Wednesday, January 7th. And yet the sun is still right there in the mix. The sun is still only a quarter of a degree away from Venus and less than a half a degree away from Mars. And of course, now the sun, Venus, and Mars are now all moving less than, just pushing maybe 2 degrees from their opposition to Jupiter. So this is just like a crazy intense period of time. And I think things are going to be unfolding here really quickly. Note also that at midday today on Wednesday, January 7th, that the moon is making a trine to the sun and Venus and Mars, maybe greasing the path for all of this to unfold. So we'll see how this does unfold. As we move to the 8th, there's no exact aspects, but we can see that the moon at noon is at 27, almost 28 degrees of Virgo, which means that the moon will be opposing Saturn and Neptune on the morning of Thursday, January 8th. And by 4 p.m., the moon will move from Virgo into Libra. And I think that this is also a key period of time because the moon is, as it's moving from Virgo into Libra, will be making a grand trine, but will be making trines with Uranus before actually this morning, before it moves into Libra, and then making a trine with Pluto after it moves into Libra. And you can see that this is actually setting up a grand trine that will, on July 19th, when the moon is also moving from Virgo into Libra, that will be within a couple of days of the exact Uranus-Pluto trine with Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, and the moon in Libra, making a grand air trine. And at that time, Neptune will also be in Aries, kind of completing a kite. And that will be a very, very potent day. That's a chart that I've been spending time looking at, as many astrologers have. As we move to the 9th, we can now see that Mars is actually conjoining the sun. In fact, you can see that the sun is now caught up with Mars. and the exact Sun-Mars conjunction occurs on the 9th at 3:41 a.m. And also today we have a very busy day because Jupiter makes its exact opposition from Venus, Venus opposing Jupiter. And this whole dynamic is incredibly, incredibly potent because we now have this T square cooking that I talked about earlier that is really coming into its own with Jupiter being opposed by Venus and the Sun and Mars, which are coming into a square with Chiron and Eris. And even the moon, as it moves through Libra, will actually finish off that grand square. This is a very, very dynamic day, and I would expect that there'll be some major news stories breaking around this period of time. And as we move to the 10th, we can really see how that grand square becomes exact, well, close to exact, as we have the moon moving through 20, 21, 22 degrees of Libra by midday, as Mars and the Sun and Venus are all at 20 and 21 degrees of Capricorn, as Jupiter is at 20 degrees of Cancer, and Chiron and Eris are at 22 and 24 degrees of Aries. This is a crazy potent day where I think that we will see some real movement as to what's going on out there, up there. We will have some conflict to deal with. Conflict may not be the right word. It's more like engagement. It's more like we can make something happen here because it's almost like there's such a high level of destabilization at this moment in time that what happens now, I think, will be part of what is feeding what will continue to unfold through January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So I think this is an incredibly potent day, a potent period of time. The sun's exact opposition to Jupiter occurs today. The sun's opposition to Jupiter is exact just at 12:42 a.m. And Mars's opposition to Jupiter is exact at just before 6:30, 6:25 a.m. And so we can see this is just an incredibly potent moment. And I think that the good news is that we can be really confident in what occurs, that there's some real sense of overconfidence, but that also means that we can take something too far. And if someone takes something too far at this point in time, I think it'll come back at them pretty quickly. If we overextend ourselves individually, I think that we're setting ourselves up for dealing with the reality as this grand square begins to dissipate over the days ahead. This is on January 10th. But notice how tight the Mars Sun Venus conjunction is. I mean, it's all, I mean, Mars to Venus, I'm sorry, Mars to Venus is still only a degree and a third apart with the sun right in the middle. This is crazy exact. And again, it's a very, very unique moment where we may have some very sobering and serious work to do to take care of things in order for the future to unfold the way we want it to. As we move to January 11th, we now can see that Venus at 22 degrees of Capricorn is squaring Chiron. And again, Venus, the Sun, and Mars will all move through those squares to both Chiron and Eris, having already moved through the opposition to Jupiter. But note that Mercury coming in behind it will get closer and closer to the opposition to Jupiter and then also move through those same squares. This is one of those patterns, this T square, this cardinal T square. Cardinal because the cardinal signs are the season starting signs. Aries starts summer in the northern hemisphere. Cancer starts I'm sorry, Aries starts spring in the northern hemisphere. Jupiter starts summer in the northern hemisphere, and Capricorn starts winter in the northern hemisphere. These cardinal signs are all 90 degrees to one another, and we're getting a hit off of this energy that I think is very, very dynamic and has propensity to change a lot of things. This is on January 11th. Also today, Eris makes its station and it begins moving direct. Both Eris and Chiron are moving so slowly now, you're going to barely see any movement out of either of them, but they will, as the month or the next couple of months unfold. Chiron will catch up to Eris for that third and final time because Chiron moves faster than Eris, and that'll be exact in March. We'll talk about that later down the road. Let's move to the 12th. The moon, oh, by the way, here on the 11th, before we change charts, we can see that the moon has moved into Scorpio on Sunday, the 11th, and the moon moves into Scorpio at just before 3 a.m., 2:55 a.m., and that can also be very pointed because as the moon moves into Scorpio, it will then, over the next few hours, square Pluto in Aquarius, and that can once again exercise or stimulate that plutonic energy that's going to become more and more stimulated as the month unfolds, and all of those planets in Capricorn move from Capricorn to Aquarius and join up with Pluto one at a time. Like I said, this month is going to go out with quite a stir, and we will see how it unfolds. This is on January 11th. As we move to the 12th, we now have the sun right behind Venus, making its square to Chiron, while Venus makes its square to Eris. But you can see that that square, that T square between Jupiter and the planets in Capricorn, Mercury now moving in toward that opposition to Jupiter, and Mercury just being now 2.5 degrees away. But we can see that that whole pattern is really, really profound and important. But we have something else now beginning to cook that I think is also equally important. And this is why the middle and end of January become a very different flavor than the beginning of January. First of all, here on Monday, the 12th, we have the moon moving through Scorpio, and it will make a trine to Jupiter and sextiles to the planets in Capricorn. That can relieve the energy a little bit, but we have something else cooking that's more important. And this is the second stabilizing pattern or stable pattern of the month of January. The first being this T square that we've been talking about and following. We're still following it. But the pattern that's beginning to unfold is a pattern that has to do with planets at the end of Capricorn making trines with Uranus at the end of Taurus. Uranus having touched into Gemini, backed into Taurus. And we can see here that Venus is already like 3.5 degrees away from being exactly trine to Uranus. And as these planets over the days ahead make those trines to Uranus, this is going to release some of that pent up energy from the engagement from the T square. Now, what's also happening during this period of time is that these planets, the Venus, Sun, Mars, and then eventually Mercury, as Mercury moving faster than these planets, will catch up to all of them and move through them. But they're not only going to be making trines to Uranus, they're also going to be making sextiles to both Saturn and Neptune. And at the same time, Saturn is making its third and final sextile to Uranus, which I talked about at the very beginning of the talk today. And that will be exact on the 19th. And so we're seeing here flavors of how this is all going to unfold in the future. But this is all new energy. This is energy. I mean, it's relying, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's replaying energies that have been moving in and out and getting closer and closer through a lot of 2025. But what's happening now is we're getting a blast into the future, and we're beginning to see this unfold as we move through this period of time. Here we are on Monday, January 12th, as we move to Tuesday, the 13th. Although the moon is still at 28 degrees of Scorpio by noon, the moon actually will move into Sagittarius at 3:34, 3:33 p.m. Today. And as that moon moves into Sagittarius, it's going to kind of give us a little bit of a wider angle view. But the moon, before it moves into Sagittarius, even just before noon, it's going to make a trine to Saturn, and then just after noon, it's going to make a trine to Neptune, and it's going to be emphasizing that Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's moving closer and closer together. Here, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction has closed in almost a full degree. It's about 2.5 degrees of orb now, but you can see that it's making closer sextiles with Uranus on one side, and the Venus now at 25 degrees of Capricorn is already picking up on its sextile to Saturn. And as the moon is moving through the latter degrees of Scorpio, it's going to be sextiling those Capricorn planets, including Mars, Sun, and Venus, and trining Saturn and Neptune and opposing Uranus. This is an incredibly dynamic moment. It's just like one dynamic moment after another here. This is all on January 13th. As we move to midday on the 14th, we can see that now the moon is at 10 degrees of Sagittarius, but we can also see that T square is still holding its own because now Mercury has moved into the 20 degrees. It's past its opposition to Jupiter here on the 14th. That opposition is exact at just moments, 16 minutes after midnight here on Wednesday, the 14th. And here by noon on the 14th, we can see that Mercury already at 20 degrees is past its opposition to Jupiter. Again, we have inflated thinking. We have people saying things that are so exaggerated, like this is the best ever. No one's ever seen anything like this. The sense of overconfidence is just off the map right now. And it's almost so far off the map that it can be ludicrous. But there's, I think that this can be called that what's that? It's a bridge too far. It's like we've overextended, and we have to walk it back. Now, at the same time, we have Venus coming into that trine with Uranus. It's only like just barely 1 degree away from being exact, and so we can see that aside from the T square with Jupiter and now Mercury, even Mercury, Mars, and the Sun, and Venus, they're all within orb, but Mercury most closely opposing Jupiter and coming into the square with Chiron and Eris, with Mars actually now having squared Chiron and coming into the square with Eris. We see this T square pattern still holding. But now we also see this little, what sometimes is called a minor grand trine. It's not really a grand trine. It's really like a sextile bowl where we have these planets making trines with Uranus and sextiles with Saturn and Neptune, while Saturn and Neptune are making those sextiles with Uranus also. And this little pattern here is adding a lot of stability and an undercurrent of what might happen as this pattern builds throughout the summer of 2026. So this is all about foreshadowing what is coming up around the bend. This is January 14th. As we move to the 15th, we can see that now Venus has passed its sextile to Saturn. Here on the 15th, it's like a never-ending string of stuff because we now have Venus making its exact trine to Uranus. This can be explosive and exciting. It can be a lot of fun, but it can be disruptive. But that Venus is also not only just past its sextile to Saturn, but it's also coming into its sextile to Neptune. We don't know whether this is real or made up, but there's something going on here. The moon in Sagittarius is making trines to the Chiron and Eris. There's a flow of optimism that's building. There's stuff is moving, and it's almost like we can't contain it, we can't stop it. Mercury is now squaring Chiron, coming into its square to Eris. Words are being spoken, and although we may mean them to heal, they're not healing. There's still disruption, and yet there is flow behind all this. This energy is moving somewhere. I have the feeling that whatever is going on now is like it's like a roller coaster that just hit an apex, and things are really speeding up as we move toward the new moon. And that new moon is on the 18th. We'll get there in just a moment. But here on the 15th, we can see that things are really beginning to pick up. As we move to the 16th, we can see that the moon is now moved into Capricorn. We have such a density of Capricorn energy now. We have we have the sun and the moon and Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all the personal planets, everything inside of Jupiter. Mercury, Venus, Mars, the sun, and the moon are all in Capricorn. This is incredibly potent. This is forcing us to deal with reality. It's like having someone, rubbing our nose in whatever the unpleasant, smell is, so that we have to deal with it. There's a sense of we can't put off what needs to happen anymore. By the way, the moon on January 16th moved into Capricorn at 3:47 a.m., 3:46, 3:47, right in there. And the seriousness now is really unfolding. We can't avoid it. And yet there's also the beginnings of movement now that Venus is sextiling Neptune and the sun is trining Uranus. We're getting that sextile bowl, that minor grand trine that's even building with potency, even as the T square is beginning to wane. The all of the inner planets now, including the Mercury, Venus, Mars, and the Sun, they're all past their opposition to Jupiter. The moon has yet to reach that point. The moon will move through that at the full moon, just prior to the full moon. But there's a sense that this T square has kind of begun to play out its energy. And the trines between Venus and Uranus, the Sun and Uranus, Mars and Uranus, Mercury and Uranus, even the new moon and Uranus, that these are all building as the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is getting closer and closer. We're coming to a really intriguing moment in time. That's all on January 16th. As we move to the 17th, the pileup here is kind of really crazy because we have some real shifts that are occurring. Not only is Venus making its exact sextile with Neptune today, we're back to the fantasy, the romance, the dream, the illusion that's playing back and forth. What is real? We have the sun at the same time making a sextile with Saturn. Oh, okay, this is real. There's something here that's really happening. But the sun is also moving into its trine with Uranus that'll happen later this morning, just before 9 a.m. here on Saturday, the 17th. I mean, this is one of the most rock and roll days I've ever seen. In fact, there's something else here that I want to mention. Oh, no, before I do that, I want to also say that Mercury catches up with Mars today, and Venus moves from Capricorn into Aquarius, so that Venus is beginning to pick up on its conjunction to Pluto, which will still take a few days to unfold. But the intensity is building. And then there's something else that I started to mention before, and now I'm coming back to, and that is the fact that that Eris is today making an exact half square and square and a half to the nodal axis. This is something that has really been, because Eris is moving so slowly. I mean, this is something that's been cooking for a while, and I'm only mentioning it not that it has impact today specifically, but it's part of the zeitgeist, I think, of the entire month. Because normally we think of the nodal axis, that's the north node at 9 Pisces, south node at 9 Virgo. And Eris right now is making a half square to the north node side and a square and a half to the south node side of the nodal axis. This is disruptive. This is actually kind of a time warp of showing things that are coming out that may tie not only to the past, but also to the future. And I don't think that this aspect would do anything by itself. It's just that there's so much else going on now, especially with Mercury squaring Eris today, and the Sun's trine to Uranus, and Mercury's conjunction with Mars. I don't even know what else to say. It'll be interesting looking at this at the mid-month update when I have a little bit of perspective on what it is that may be unfolding. Right now, these are all just intellectual ideas, but boy, this is just a total explosive rock and roll period of time. Um, this is all on January 17th. Also, as the moon is moving through latter degrees of Capricorn between Saturday and Sunday, the moon will move through Capricorn and line up with Mars and Mercury. And actually, the we have the new moon itself. The new moon occurs at 11:51 a.m. at 28 degrees of Capricorn and 44 minutes. 28 degrees of Capricorn and 44 minutes. And this is, again, just before noon on Sunday, the 18th. And the potency of this is the fact that this new moon is tightly trine Uranus and tightly sextile the midpoint between Saturn and Neptune. If we were to look at just these points themselves, meaning the Sun, Moon, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, we can see that there are 5 planets involved, including the Sun and the Moon, the new moon, that are trining Uranus and having that Saturn and Neptune kind of at the halfway point. This is also a getting ready energy because this is occurring in earth and water signs. The new moon in Capricorn is a practical, three-dimensional Capricorn earth sign. Taurus, Uranus in Taurus is also the simplicity of the three-dimensional world as it is earth sign, and the Saturn Neptune conjunction that is still approaching its exactness. It's still 1 month away from being exact, but it's now about 2 1/3 degrees from being exact. And you see, these points are all in what are called feminine signs, yin signs. The fire and air are not involved. These are just earth and water that are drawing inward and downward. And why this is so significant is that as the Saturn Neptune conjunction occurs in late February, and then as Uranus moves direct, and by summer it's back in Gemini, we have this Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus all making the same pattern, but in fire and air rather than water and earth. And this is the shift that's going on a deeper level through 2025, 6, 7, is as these outer planets are moving from water and earth, Pluto having moved from earth into air, Saturn and Neptune moving from water into fire, and Uranus moving from Taurus earth into Gemini air. This is about this larger shift, and I think this new moon, we will be feeling this very, very profoundly. Then, as we move to the 19th, um, we have another round of shifting energies because, first of all, we have the moon and the sun both moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And remember, I said earlier, as these planets move into Aquarius, they're going to be picking up on the conjunction to Pluto, which is not an easy conjunction. This is about the hell realms. And again, we have to be careful because this isn't the hell where we go to get punished. This is the larger hell realms of where, almost like the Tibetan Bardo states of in between, this is where anything can happen. This is the darkest of night. These are the shadow realms. This is where a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. It's in those dark spaces that we cannot see. So as these planets move from Capricorn into Aquarius, the moon moving fast right after the new moon will move into Aquarius just a few hours. Remember, the new moon occurs just before noon, and by 2:17 p.m. on the 18th, the moon will move into Aquarius. And as we move to the 19th, we can see that the moon actually will join up with both Venus and then with Pluto. And by noon on the 19th, we can also see that the sun is at 29 3/4 degrees, 29 degrees 45 minutes of Capricorn, and the sun itself will move into Aquarius at 5:44 this afternoon. That is on Monday, January 19th. But we have, again, just an incredibly potent day because the sun, just before it changes signs, will make that exact sextile to Neptune. Again, the dream, the illusion. And then it'll move into Aquarius again at 5:44 p.m. But we also have Venus catching up with Pluto, and that exact conjunction will occur here on the 19th at 8:04 p.m. And when any planet lines up with Pluto, there's an intensity of volatility. And so we're feeling that energy today. This is quite, again, a deep and explosive day. One of the things that will contain the energy, I think, a bit is that Saturn will be making its third and final sextile with Uranus. I talked about that at the very beginning, where we have a stabilization to the sudden changes that are occurring. And I think that we're feeling all of that today. But at the same time, Mars is making its exact trine to Uranus. This is like the tower. Mercury has also just made that same, trine to Uranus. That was yesterday evening. And Mars making its trine to Uranus and its sextile to Saturn, while Saturn is making its sextile to Uranus. This is a profound event, and I can expect that we will see some radical shifts on the political fronts, on the economic front, on the environmental front. Just a very, very potent period of time, this January 19th. This whole mid-January is just incredibly dynamic. Let's move through to the 20th, where we now have Mercury having moved from Capricorn into Aquarius. Look, now we have Mercury, the Sun, Pluto, Venus, and the Moon in Aquarius. Mars will follow into Aquarius on the 23rd, but by then the Moon will have moved out. But we're getting this blast into the future. In fact, as the Sun moves into Aquarius, it's already picking up on its conjunction with Pluto, and Mercury also doing the same. We will see those unfold in the days ahead. This is on January 20th, where we have Mercury actually, moving into Aquarius by the 21st. We can see that Mercury has joined up with the sun. That was exact at 7:48 this morning on Wednesday, the 21st. But we also now can see that the moon has moved into Pisces. The moon entered Pisces late last night at 10:49 p.m. And this is going to be interesting because as the moon moves through Pisces, it's going to take a run across Saturn and Neptune, again, highlighting the apex of that little mini grand trine that we can still see here. Even though Mars has passed its trine to Uranus, it's still at noon today. Mars trine to Uranus is still just about a degree of orb, but we can see that the moon will move through that point as it joins up with Saturn and Neptune over the next day and a half or two. Here on the 21st, we do have the exact Mercury Sun conjunction that occurs at 7:48 a.m. And as we move to the 22nd, notice here how that T square that had been with us through the first part of the month is completely gone. There's no planets left in well, Mars is left at the last degree of Capricorn, but there's no planets opposing Jupiter anymore. And so what we're really seeing here now is a stabilization from whatever it is that's gone on, especially now on the 22nd as Mercury joins up with Pluto. And again, this is more deep, explosive communication, power struggles kind of coming up in a way that we couldn't possibly have imagined, with Mars making its exact sextile to Neptune. There's shape-shifting going on. It's hard to keep up with what's unfolding here. And of course, by later in the day on the 22nd, the moon will move through its conjunctions with Saturn and Neptune on its way to Aries. It'll move into Aries early tomorrow morning on the 23rd. The moon enters Aries on the 23rd at 5:25 a.m. And of course, now with the moon moving into Aries, it's going to pick up now on the sextiles to the sun in Aquarius, to Pluto in Aquarius, to Mars in Aquarius. This is also more action, action, action on the 23rd. We also have the sun's exact conjunction with Pluto, the intensity, the volatility, the changes that are occurring now. Again, it's hard to keep up with it all. This is on the 23rd. As we move to and also we can see that Mars has moved into Aquarius. I think I said that there's just so much going on. I'll break this down a whole lot more in detail in the mid-month for those of you who are at the $3 a month level and get the mid-month update. But it's just so much change. I mean, we now have all the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and the sun and Pluto in Aquarius, with the moon in Aries, and the moon moving through the point where the Saturn-Neptune conjunction will occur in just a month, that this is all still resonating past to the present to the future in a way that it's really hard to keep up with. On the 24th, no exact aspects. We can see that the moon will catch up with the Chiron and Eris and square Jupiter here on the 24th. We can also see that there's still that minor grand trine in play, although it's beginning to dissipate also, although the Saturn is still closely sextile to the Uranus. That's still less than a half a degree apart. The other aspects, including the Mars to Uranus Mars trine Uranus is beginning to dissipate. And I think we're getting a chance here finally to take a breath and see what it is that's gone down. Same thing here on the 25th. The moon moves into Taurus, though. It does that at 10:05 a.m. And as the moon moves through Taurus, it's going to square Mars, Pluto, the sun, Mercury. These are not comfortable days. There's a lot going on, and we can accomplish a lot, but we are in movement here. Even though the moon in Taurus would like to be stable and lazy, I think, on one level, I don't think there's anything lazy about this moon. I think as we hit that opening square this afternoon on January 25th, I think we're basically deciding what is it that we're going to leave behind and where is it that we're going. This is like, I think, really, really potent stuff. Then on the 26th, we have an important shift, and that is that Neptune moves from Pisces into Aries. This is a very slow moving shift. And again, I think we talked about this earlier, but Neptune actually moved into Aries at the end of March of 2025. It turned retrograde the beginning of July, and then it backed into Pisces on October 22nd. It turned direct the beginning of December, and on January 26th, it moves back into Aries. This is imagination on fire. And again, it's part of a whole larger scenario. And even though it might feel like there's so much going on now, this is still all it's still all prologue. It's still all feeding, it's all precursor to what it is around the bend. And so if you've ever heard someone say, hang on to your hat, this is that time because hats are being blown off. And this is just an amazingly potent period of time. This is on the 26th when Neptune enters Aries, where it will now stay in Aries for 14 years. And we'll have a lot to say about Neptune in Aries. And certainly in next month's, in the February forecast, we'll have a lot to say about Saturn and Neptune together in Aries. Very, very potent energy on the 26th. As we move to the 27th, we have Mars actually catching up to Pluto. Again, this is another round of intensity. The Mars-Pluto conjunctions have not been kind to us in the recent past history. It's often someone getting a little bit out of control, doing something that maybe need not have been done, especially as the moon through this period of time is going to be conjoining Uranus. And then the moon will move from Taurus, where it will conjoin Uranus. It'll move from Taurus into Gemini. And it does that today on the 27th, just after noon, actually at 12:54 p.m., just before 1 p.m. And again, this is quite volatile. This is, I would be real surprised if we get through this without something happening that will, kind of really, touch us in a very deep and profound way. I don't know what that is, but as the moon moves from Taurus into Gemini, it's then over the next half a day going to pick up on trines to the Mars and Pluto that are conjunct, and then the Sun and all the other, and Mercury and Venus, and Mercury catching up to Venus very quickly. This is on the 27th. Mercury will actually join up with Venus in a couple of days on the 29th. And let's just move this ahead one more day. And we can see now that the moon now is in mid-Gemini, making a trine to Mercury, and actually Mercury and Venus in mid-Aquarius, where things have changed. I don't know. I can't project ahead what it is that will have changed, but something's different already. And I think we're getting tastes of what's around the bend in a way that I think can be quite surprising. Here on the 28th, we also have Venus and Mercury making half squares with Saturn on the 27th and 28th, I think motivating us to take action and to do something. On the 29th, we have the moon moving into Cancer at 2:31 p.m. And I think here on the 29th, We also have Mercury catching up with Venus. We're now, maybe this is a day of sweet talking. Maybe this is a day when we can finally express ourselves in a way that's a bit more gentle. But we also have Mercury and Venus making half squares with Neptune. And this again can be another round of confusion. Although the moon's entry into Cancer once again is suggesting that we want to hold on to what we have. We want to protect our interests. There's a part of us with all these planets in Aquarius, this whole idea of thinking globally, but the moon is saying, act locally. The moon is saying, what do I need to do to protect my own feelings, my home, my family, because things out there are moving quite quickly. That is on the 29th. And then on the 30th and the 31st, we don't have a whole lot of specific action, but Mercury and Venus make quincunxes to Jupiter. And this is a couple of days of not knowing how to integrate what it is the changes, what the changes are that have occurred. This is the how much is enough, how much is too much. Venus and Mercury making quincunxes with Jupiter on the 30th, with the moon moving through Cancer, catching up with Jupiter. It's like an annoyance here of not knowing where we stand and how to move forward. I think this can be a bit disorienting, but I also think that this is setting a tone for what will happen next month. And as we move ahead to the 31st, the last day of the month, the moon moves from Cancer into Leo, but it doesn't do that until 4:08 p.m. We can see here that midday the moon is making trines to Saturn, and then as it moves into Leo, the moon will make a trine to Neptune. Meanwhile, it's also picking up on the sextile to Uranus, and again, we're getting a flavor of a mini grand trine. But it's still really in water and earth. The moon in Cancer, water, Saturn in Pisces, water, Uranus in Taurus, earth. And then when the moon moves into Leo, it'll then pick up on its trine to Neptune, and that'll be fire to fire. And that's where we enter February, because we're getting this larger shift from water and earth into fire and air. And by the beginning of February, we're going to have a moon in fiery Leo, Neptune in fiery Aries, and Mercury, Venus, Mars, Sun, and Pluto all in airy in area Aquarius. So this is what this month looks like. It's an incredible shift of energy. And again, I don't know how it's going to play out. And I actually believe that anyone who says they know how it's going to play out is going to be surprised. I think that we are now moving into new territory. We're moving into new territory very fast, and more than ever, it will behoove all of us to think as cosmically as we can, as big as we can, especially with all those planets moving into and through Aquarius. And yet at the same time, we have to bring it back home, back to our emotions, back to our feelings, back to our family, back to our loved ones. Think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine, and peace be with all of us.